The late September air in Oxfordshire was thick with the scent of hay and livestock, charged with the energy of money and old secrets. The county auction had always been a strange kind of theater, where desperation, hope, and profit danced on a muddy stage. Inside the barn, voices bounced off the wooden rafters, echoing sharp bids and rough laughter, punctuated by the low, anxious nickers of horses waiting their turn. Oliver Kenton stood apart, his shoulders straight beneath the old field jacket, a veteran's stillness in his bones. He didn't mingle with the chatter or respond to the curious glances thrown his way by dealers who'd recognized his face from years past. He kept his eyes on the order sheet, watching the lot numbers tick by, barely moving except to check his watch now and then. Every movement seemed deliberate, purposeful. He was a man who'd learned the value of patience and silence, a discipline hammered into him by years with the Household Cavalry. The auctioneer's voice cracked the din as another gelding was paraded out, hooves sliding uncertainly on the straw-strewn concrete. The crowd murmured, attention wavering. But then, the tension shifted, a hush rolling through as the next horse appeared. He was a giant among horses, a towering Shire stallion, black as a thundercloud, his body scarred from old battles. Across his thick neck and crest, a deep white scar shone like a crooked line of frost. And there, swinging from his halter, a red plastic tag, danger. Someone in the crowd let out a low whistle. Another man nudged his friend and shook his head, lips pressed tight. The stallion balked at the gate, whites of his eyes flashing. The handler tugged the lead rope hard, but the horse jerked sideways, smashing the old wooden gate. Crack! The crowd flinched, and the handler, red-faced and cursing under his breath, scrambled to regain control. The auctioneer, sensing a story, began to play to the crowd, his words rolling over the gasps. Big boy's got a story, folks. Black Duke of Ashbury, 3-time pole winner, but beware, got a temper to match. Who's brave enough to take him home? Laughter broke out, nervous and sharp, but Oliver's eyes didn't leave the horse. The Duke's massive chest heaved, nostrils flaring, as if every scent and sound in this place was an old enemy. But it wasn't rage in his eyes. Oliver recognized it, the haunted look of something betrayed too many times. He'd seen it in horses and men alike. A buzz cut through the air as a camera phone lifted, the tiny red recording light glowing. Kira Doyle, tabloid reporter, aimed her phone with predatory glee. "Here we go," she whispered, voice barely audible above the noise. "Crazed warhorse, Royal Army vet risks his life for living bomb." The angle would be perfect for her tabloid's next headline. The bidding began awkwardly, few willing to play. The price started low and dropped lower. No one wanted the risk, not after the stories about the Duke, about the stable fires, the ruined gates, the near misses and supposed attacks. Each rumor grew as it passed from ear to ear, like a sickness. But the real story, Oliver suspected, was buried somewhere deeper. Suddenly, the Duke reared, the lead rope snapping from the handler's grip, his hooves pounding thunder into the old barn floor. The auctioneer froze, his voice caught mid-patter. Panic swept through the crowd, people stumbling back, but Oliver didn't move. He stepped forward, steady, and stood alone in the horse's path. The Duke, wild-eyed, came to a halt, towering above him, breath misting in the cold air. The silence was absolute, every soul in the barn waiting for the explosion. But Oliver did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded sugar cube, and held it in an open palm, arm loose, non-threatening. His voice, when it came, was barely above a murmur. "Easy, lad. I see you," he said, breath even, tone soft as old leather. The Duke's ears twitched, muscles trembling, but he didn't strike. The auctioneer, sensing opportunity, stammered. "Any more bids? Do I hear 50, 40, 30 pounds for the monster?" A wave of snickers, someone shouted. "Give him away!" "Too much trouble." Oliver raised his hand, calm and precise. 35, he said, voice cutting the noise. Gasps rippled. The auctioneer blinked, surprised by the bid. "Sold, then, 35 to the gentleman in the army coat." The gavel slammed. Just like that, the Duke of Ashbury belonged to Oliver Kenton. Kira's camera caught it all. The chaos, the gamble, the strange, inexplicable calm of the man facing a living storm. As the crowd dispersed, a whisper found its way through the ranks of traders and horsemen. They said the Duke's last owner had trained under Rupert Vale, the notorious quick-fix trainer known for his brutal methods and viral videos. Stories clung to Vale's name like mud, about ropes, whips, horses forced to kneel, tamed in 10 minutes for the camera. Oliver heard the whispers, but his mind was elsewhere. He led the Duke out, the big horse snorting, sidestepping, but not pulling away. Out in the cool dusk, he paused, hand on the thick black neck, feeling the shudder beneath his fingers. For a moment, Duke stilled, just the two of them against the emptying auction yard. Oliver leaned close, words for the horse alone. "You're safe, now. No more quick fixes. No more lies." He saw Kira circling, phone still raised, hungry for another angle. Julian Ashbury stood in the shadows, lips pressed tight, calculating. The storm was just beginning. And as the last slant of sunlight fell across the Duke's battered hide, Oliver Kenton made a silent promise. Whatever it took, this time, progress would be slow and real. No matter how many wanted him to fail. The Duke lowered his head, just an inch. Oliver allowed himself a breath. The story had begun. Dawn broke over Ashbury Hall with a cool, silvery mist rolling across the paddocks, settling against the centuries-old stone walls of the estate. Ashbury Hall had once been a beacon of Old English nobility, proud banners, manicured lawns, endless tea in the drawing room, but those days felt like they belonged to another world. Now, even the main house seemed to exhale quietly, every window watching the day with worried eyes. Oliver guided the Duke's heavy transport van through the winding drive, gravel crunching beneath the tires, and parked by the stable block. The air was thick with anticipation. Alfie Briggs, the young stable hand, hovered nearby, wide-eyed and eager, his boots almost too clean for this place. Tom Redfern, the farrier, leaned on a fence rail, arms folded, his gaze appraising and quietly curious. Lady Eleanor Ashbury emerged from the front steps, her posture as regal as the white-haired portrait in the hall behind her. But there was a fragility in her eyes, a cautious optimism wrapped in layers of pride and hidden worry. She crossed the gravel with careful steps, her cane tapping a rhythm against the ground. "You're early, Mr. Kenton," she said, a ghost of a smile flickering at her lips. "And I see you found yourself quite the project." Oliver nodded, opening the van doors. The Duke stomped and shifted inside, the ramp rattling as it hit the earth. Alfie held his breath, his hand clutching a worn halter, uncertain. "He's quieter than he looks," Oliver said, almost to himself. Lady Eleanor studied the horse, eyes tracing the scar and the red danger tag swinging from his halter. For a moment, the two of them, aristocrat and ex-soldier, stood in silence, joined by the weight of unspoken things. Julian Ashbury arrived late, crisp suit and perfect hair, phone glued to his ear as he negotiated another deal. He ended the call, slipped the phone into his pocket, and joined the group with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Aunt Eleanor, Oliver," he said, glancing at the Duke. "Impressive creature. But perhaps a little dangerous for our needs here." Lady Eleanor's jaw tightened just enough for Oliver to notice. "Mr. Kenton," she said quietly, "there are insurance matters to discuss. The company is concerned about safety after that, unfortunate article last year." Her words hung in the air. The real message was clear. If Duke was labeled a threat, their insurance would drop them. No insurance, no horses. No horses, no Ashbury Hall. Julian placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, Aunt. We'll keep everything above board. In fact, I have a contact, Rupert Vale. You've heard of him? He's handled horses like this before. In and out, quick solutions." Oliver felt a chill. He'd heard Vale's name whispered in every stable from Liverpool to London, fast fixes, viral stunts, never a moment's patience. "I'd like a few days," Oliver replied, voice calm, "to assess Duke myself. He's not what those headlines say." Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Time is money, Oliver. And every day we keep a dangerous animal on site, our position weakens. The mortgage on this estate isn't forgiving, and our creditors, well, let's just say they don't have much patience." Lady Eleanor's face flushed. She turned away, gesturing toward the paddocks. "Show me how you handle him, Mr. Kenton." Out in the yard, Oliver led the Duke into a sun-flecked paddock, grass still wet with dew. The big horse tossed his head, wary but not wild, his muscles tense under the surface. Alfie watched from a safe distance, fingers clenched around a pitchfork. Lady Eleanor stood at the fence, shoulders squared. Oliver kept his movements slow, every gesture clear, deliberate. He led Duke in a small circle, never forcing, always leaving an escape. The Duke's ears flicked, uncertain, but he followed. For a moment, the estate seemed to hold its breath. Old walls, young dreams, everything depending on whether this new arrival could become something more than a problem. "He's got sense," Oliver said quietly, "just been rushed too hard, too fast." Horses remember what you teach them, good or bad. Julian watched, calculating. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face as Duke moved without panic. Regardless, he said, Rupert will be here tomorrow. He has some ideas for swift resolution. Aunt, I'll handle the details. Lady Eleanor gave Oliver a long, searching look. For a second, her mask slipped, a flicker of shame at letting her nephew control the future of her home. Oliver met her gaze and, just briefly, glanced back at the Duke, who'd lowered his head, chewing quietly. He deserves a chance, Oliver said softly, for both their sakes. Inside the house, as Lady Eleanor walked Oliver down the main hall, her voice dropped low. There's something else, Mr. Kenton. The mortgage. There's a clause. Any major incident, accident or safety violation, triggers a forced sale. Julian has the power to act, and the creditors are hungry. I can't afford another mistake. Oliver stopped by a window, watching the Duke in the field, the first touch of sunlight catching the scar on his neck. Lady Eleanor's reflection hovered in the glass beside his, pale and tight-lipped. Don't let them take him, she whispered, not if you can help it. Outside, the estate creaked and groaned under the weight of its history, a place both beautiful and burdened. Julian strode back to his car, already dialing Rupert Vale, plotting his next move. Alfie watched the Duke from behind the stable wall, a spark of hope flickering in his young eyes. And Oliver, standing alone, made his decision. Slow and steady. No shortcuts. No more broken promises. As night settled over Ashbury Hall, tension buzzed like a warning through every stone and blade of grass. The real battle was just beginning. The days at Ashbury Hall unfolded in measured, deliberate strokes, every moment planned with the calm intensity of a chessmaster playing a long, dangerous game. Oliver had learned, long ago in the cavalry, that with some animals, horses and people alike, progress was a thing measured not in leaps but in inches. Especially when the stakes were this high. His system started that first morning. At 7 a.m., the sun barely above the line of oaks, Oliver was already at the stable door, boots dusted with last night's rain, hands steady despite the nervous energy flickering behind his eyes. Duke waited on the other side of the door, enormous, black, the red danger tag swinging gently as he shifted his weight. Alfie stood back by the tack room, eyes wide and face pale. Oliver didn't push. He stood just outside the stall, speaking in a low, even tone. He offered Duke a chance to sniff his hand through the bars, letting the horse decide the pace. For long minutes, Duke just watched him, ears swiveling, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scent. Oliver waited. Eventually, the horse stepped forward, touched Oliver's knuckles with a damp, hesitant nose, and then retreated. A small thing, but for Oliver, it was the start of something bigger. By 1 p.m., after a quiet morning of chores and sidelong glances from staff, Oliver returned. This time, he didn't enter the stall but stood by the door and reached in, touching Duke's massive shoulder. The horse tensed, muscle bunching under his glossy hide, but didn't rear or bite. Instead, Duke pulled away and then, with a great shuddering sigh, stood still as Oliver traced the curve of his neck. For a full minute, they stood like that, two survivors sizing each other up. At 5 p.m., the last light of day slanting gold through the dusty stable windows, Oliver brought Duke a scoop of feed, placing it gently at the far end of the stall. He stayed by the door, not blocking the exit, never making the horse feel trapped. Duke eyed him warily but crossed the straw-strewn floor, hunger overcoming caution. He ate, casting nervous glances back at Oliver, but didn't bolt. Alfie hovered by the doorway, his voice hushed. He's not so bad, is he? Oliver shook his head, managing a faint smile. He's been taught to fear, that's all. People forget, but horses never do. The routine repeated for 3 days, always the same, consistency, calm, slow progress. On the third morning, Oliver brought in Dr. Priya Nayar, the veterinarian. She was brisk, practical, her accent crisp over clipped English. She entered the stall with careful, precise steps, her bag slung over her shoulder, eyes sharp. Big fella, isn't he? She murmured, crouching low to examine Duke's legs. No sign of acute pain, no heat in the joints. But watch him with pressure, see that? The second you touch his neck, he flinches like he's expecting a blow. She traced the pale scar across Duke's neck, shaking her head. Someone used a sacking out technique, badly. That's rope burn, and deep. Whoever trained him wanted quick results, not lasting ones. Oliver nodded grimly. The name Vale drifted between them, unspoken but heavy. Will he recover? Alfie asked, nerves shining in his young voice. Maybe, Dr. Nair said, if he's given time, trust, and no more quick fixes. That afternoon, Oliver tried a new exercise, pressure and release. He entered Duke's stall, keeping to the side, and gently laid his hand on Duke's massive shoulder. The horse stiffened, eyes wide, but didn't explode. Oliver counted silently, heart pounding, then withdrew his hand and stepped back. Duke watched him, uncertain, but didn't shy. Outside, Julian watched from a distance, arms folded, his expression sour. Every time Duke showed a hint of progress, Julian seemed irritated. He called Rupert Vale twice that day, arranging for a visit. The clock was ticking, and everyone felt it. That evening, as Oliver finished his rounds, he caught Alfie sitting on an upturned bucket just outside Duke's stall, sketching the horse's head on the back of a feed invoice. He doesn't look dangerous when he's quiet, Alfie said, not looking up. He looks sad. Oliver sat beside him, elbows on his knees. People see what they want to see. But every animal has a story, Alfie. You just have to listen close. When Oliver locked up for the night, he passed Lady Eleanor in the hallway, her shoulders stooped under the weight of sleeplessness. How is he? She asked quietly. Better, Oliver replied, but it's slow going. He needs time, and so do we. Lady Eleanor smiled, a thin, tired line. I wish time was something I could give you. But I'm not sure how much we have left. Her words haunted Oliver as he lay awake in the staff quarters, listening to the wind rattling the old window frames. Out in the barn, the Duke stood alone in his stall, the faint light of the moon casting long, uncertain shadows. But at midnight, a miracle, faint but real. Duke, usually restless, stood still as Oliver passed through on a late-night check, ears flicking toward the sound of a soft whistle. For the first time, the big horse didn't shy or snort. Instead, he lowered his head, eyes soft. Oliver watched him, hope blooming slow and stubborn. Inch by inch, this was how trust was built. No shortcuts, no stunts. Just patience, and the promise of something better. Outside, the world spun on, oblivious to the small victories unfolding in the quiet heart of Ashbury Hall. The storm was gathering, but for a moment, there was peace. Ashbury Hall was never truly quiet, not with the early autumn wind sighing in the eaves or the crows gossiping over the yard, but on the day Rupert Vale arrived, the place felt almost electric with tension. The main stable yard was cleaner than usual, thanks to Lady Eleanor's orders. She believed in keeping up appearances even if the walls were crumbling. Tom Redfern, the farrier, gave Oliver a look that said more than words. Trouble was coming. Vale pulled up just past noon, his glossy black van bearing a bold silver logo, Rue Vale Horse Solutions. He wore his celebrity status like a tailored jacket, all expensive boots, sharp smile, and a glint in his eyes that never quite reached his heart. A small crew spilled out behind him. Cameras at the ready, boom mics already up. Kira Doyle, phone in hand, was close on their heels, eager for drama. Julian greeted them like a man bringing a cavalry to his own cause, his handshake with Vale firm and theatrical. He turned to Lady Eleanor and Oliver, voice loud for the cameras. Rupert's agreed to give us a demonstration, he said, his tone slick. Nothing to lose, right? Maybe some quick progress will convince the insurers. Lady Eleanor managed a polite nod, but her eyes were cloudy. Oliver, arms folded across his chest, stayed silent, his jaw working. Vale wasted no time. He strode up to Duke's stall, peered in, then whistled. Magnificent beast. Shame about the temper, but I've handled worse. Oliver stepped in, voice measured. He's not a case for theatrics, Mr. Vale. He needs time, not another show. Vale flashed a practiced grin. Time isn't something people have these days, Mr. Kenton. Results matter, especially for horses with reputations. The crew set up a makeshift round pen in the lower yard. Lights, tripods, and microphones popped up like mushrooms. People gathered, drawn by the spectacle, some staff, a few locals, even Tom Redfern, his arms crossed and face unreadable. Alfie hung back near the fence, clutching a lead rope, worry etched deep in his young face. Kira whispered to her cameraman. Get the anger, the action. The more dangerous he looks, the better. Duke was let out, muscles bunched, eyes wide under the glare of lights. The red danger tag seemed to glow. The tension in the air was sharp, like the pause before a thunderstorm. Vale strode into the ring with a training whip, snapping it for effect. The crowd leaned in, eager for drama. Julian grinned, arms folded. already imagining the problem solved and his development plans moving forward. Oliver couldn't take it. He stepped to the edge of the ring, his voice cutting through the noise. He's not a circus act. He's a living animal, not a problem to be fixed in 10 minutes. Vale barely glanced at him, waving to the cameras. Sometimes, Mr. Kenton, you have to show who's in charge. That's what people pay to see. The whip cracked, sharp and loud. Duke flinched, sidestepping, his massive body trembling. Vale circled, pushing, demanding submission. The crowd murmured, half thrilled, half afraid. Kira's phone was live streaming, comments pouring in, tame the beast, dangerous monster, bet he won't last 5 minutes. Duke didn't attack, didn't rear. He did what so many misunderstood animals do. He searched for an exit, backing away, nostrils wide, eyes pleading for relief. Oliver's hands balled into fists at his sides. He could see Duke's skin twitch with every snap of the whip, each movement fueled by old scars and panic. Lady Eleanor's face was a mask of polite horror. Even Tom Redfern, so often silent, shook his head. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the commotion. Harriet Bloom, wearing a dark jacket emblazoned with the RSPCA crest, pushed through the crowd. She held up her badge with calm authority. That's enough. I'm here investigating reports of improper training equipment being used at British horse facilities. I've seen enough for now. Vale's bravado flickered, but only for a moment. I'm not breaking any laws, Harriet, he replied smoothly. It's all perfectly above board. We'll see about that, she answered, eyes narrowing. My office has received more than one complaint about your methods, Mr. Vale. Until we're satisfied, I strongly suggest you step back and let Mr. Kenton continue his work. The crowd's mood shifted, tension now mixed with uncertainty. Julian scowled, knowing his plan was unraveling. Kira's camera dropped slightly, catching Oliver's expression, relief and quiet gratitude mingling with anger. Vale's crew packed up, muttering about wasted time. The round pen emptied, and Duke was led back to his stall, shaking, sweat lathered on his black flanks but still on his feet. Alfie reached out, touching Duke's neck gently as Oliver whispered soothing words. It's all right. You're safe now. Lady Eleanor placed a trembling hand on Oliver's arm as the others drifted away. Thank you, she murmured. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here. Oliver shook his head, watching Duke as the big horse settled, exhaustion in every muscle. It's not over, he replied quietly. They'll come again, and they'll keep coming until they get what they want. Outside, Vale shot one last look over his shoulder, his expression dark. Harriet made a note in her book, then nodded to Oliver. We'll keep an eye on things, she said. But don't let your guard down. Not for a second. As the sun set behind Ashbury Hall, the floodlights faded, leaving the old estate in uneasy twilight. Oliver sat with Duke long after the others left, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horse, determined to fight for every inch of trust they'd earned. For now, the storm had passed. But far on the horizon, new trouble was brewing. Morning at Ashbury Hall came cool and clear, dew shimmering on the grass, the old stone walls golden in the early light. There was a sense of cautious hope in the stable yard, a fragile truce after the spectacle of Vale's failed demonstration. But Oliver knew that real progress wouldn't happen under floodlights or the eyes of a crowd. It would be built, slowly, in the quiet hours, every small step of victory. He started before dawn. The first thing he did was visit Duke's stall with a handful of fresh hay, letting the big horse smell his presence before he appeared. Duke, ears flicking nervously, watched as Oliver spoke in soft, even tones. No sudden movements, no pressure. Just patience, again and again. Alfie arrived soon after, sleep still clinging to his face, but his eyes eager. Oliver greeted him with a nod, handing him a brush. Just slow and gentle. No pressure. Let him see your hands at all times. Alfie followed, trembling a little. He stepped into Duke's stall, showing the brush, then waited. Duke sniffed, head high, but didn't back away. Alfie reached forward, brushing the great horse's shoulder, careful, his face set in concentration. After a few strokes, Duke shifted, muscles relaxing slightly, and for the first time, let Alfie finish the job. Good, Oliver said quietly. That's the first win of the day. The routine was different today. Tom Redfern, the farrier, arrived mid-morning, his toolbox clanking, his gait steady. Tom had seen enough wild and wounded horses to know when to wait and when to work. He knelt by Duke's massive hooves, working quietly. His words meant as much for the horse as for Oliver. Big fella, aren't you? No tricks, no hurry, just want to check those shoes. Oliver stood to the side, lead rope in hand, but not directly in front of Duke, never blocking, never cornering. Tom lifted a hoof, gently, watching Duke's ears and breathing. For a tense moment, everyone waited. But Duke stayed still, just a minute, his huge body trembling but not resisting. Tom worked fast, skillful, and when he finished, he patted Duke's leg. There you go, big guy. Not so bad, right? Oliver felt a pulse of pride. These weren't flashy victories, but each minute Duke cooperated was a miracle. The next step was pressure and release. Oliver slipped into the stall, moving with practiced calm. He approached Duke's shoulder, placed a hand on the black hide, and pressed gently. When Duke stood his ground, even for a few seconds, Oliver let go, stepping back, letting the horse process. If Duke flinched, Oliver simply waited, never forcing, always patient. Over and over, they repeated the dance. Sometimes Duke would panic, dancing sideways, eyes rolling with fear. Oliver simply stood his ground, never shouting, never yanking the rope. Gradually, Duke's reactions softened. By midday, the horse took a small but significant step. He lowered his head, stretched his neck, and nudged Oliver's arm, asking, almost timidly, for reassurance. Alfie, watching from the doorway, nearly burst. He touched you. Did you see? He actually touched you. Oliver smiled, a rare, genuine grin. That's his way of saying he's trying. That's trust, Alfie. The hardest thing to earn. The stable felt different that day. Even Lady Eleanor paused during her rounds, watching the slow transformation with awe and relief. But there was more. As Oliver reviewed footage from the stall security camera, a precaution since the insurance company insisted on monitoring dangerous animals, he noticed a strange pattern. Every night, Duke paced in circles, stopping at the far wall, flinching as if avoiding an invisible whip. The horse's muscles twitched, and he threw his head as if remembering pain. Even with no one present, the memories of old abuses haunted him, chasing him through the darkness. Oliver sat back, rubbing his temples, anger tightening his chest. The past lingered longer than any scar. That afternoon, Oliver decided to try something new. He led Duke to the outer paddock, Alfie trailing behind, carrying a bucket of grain. The grass was lush, the fence secure. Oliver unclipped the lead, stepping back to give Duke room. At first, Duke froze, unsure. But then, sensing freedom, he took a tentative step into the open, tail flicking nervously. Oliver whistled, a sound Duke now recognized. The big horse turned, ears pricked forward. Alfie, barely breathing, extended his hand. Duke approached, slow but steady, and pressed his massive forehead into Alfie's chest, eyes closing just for a moment. Alfie blinked away tears. He trusts me. I can't believe it. Oliver's voice was gentle. He's starting to. You can't rush trust, but you can build it, piece by piece. Tom Redfern watched from the fence, shaking his head in disbelief. I've seen a lot of tough cases, Oliver, but I've never seen a Shire come back from that far. Oliver nodded, keeping his gaze on Duke. It's not about making him forget. It's about showing him life can be different. As the sun set, Alfie lingered at the stall, brushing Duke's neck. The horse's eyes drooped, content, his breathing slow and even. For the first time since arriving at Ashbury, Duke looked at peace. Oliver watched the scene, hope burning steady in his chest. They were making progress, minute by minute, millimeter by millimeter. Every tiny win mattered. But as the sky darkened, he couldn't shake the sense of trouble waiting just beyond the light. In the silence of the night, with Duke quietly resting in his stall, Oliver vowed to keep fighting, for every inch of trust, every new beginning. The real test, he knew, was yet to come. The fragile hope that had begun to blossom at Ashbury Hall didn't last long. The next morning, a thick envelope, heavy with legal threats, arrived on Lady Eleanor's breakfast tray. The sun had barely cleared the line of elms when Julian swept in, dressed for town, tie perfectly knotted, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. Lady Eleanor opened the envelope with trembling hands, eyes scanning the document. Oliver, still in his stable jacket, entered the parlor as she reached the final page. Her voice was small and tight. Julian, what is this? Julian didn't bother to hide his pleasure. It's quite simple, Aunt Eleanor. If Mr. Kenton cannot demonstrate that the horse is safe for the public within 7 days, we will have to close the stables and remove the animal. The insurance company won't wait any longer. I've already spoken with Vale. He's ready to take the horse off our hands for a fair price, should we need to act quickly. Lady Eleanor's face blanched, her grip tightening on the letter. Oliver's jaw clenched, but his voice was steady. Duke isn't dangerous. He needs time, not threats. If you force a change now, you'll undo everything we've accomplished. Julian's tone was smooth as glass. That may be true, but the creditors won't accept good intentions as payment. This estate is not just your legacy, Aunt. It's a business, and we're running out of lifelines. I need results, or I'll have no choice. There was a heaviness in the room, the kind that smothered hope. Lady Eleanor's eyes drifted to the window, the great oak outside framed in sunlight. For a moment, she looked impossibly old, like a memory pressed between the pages of a book. Then, with a deep breath, she steadied herself. Oliver, perhaps. Perhaps it's time to let Mr. Vale take Duke. It would solve everything. Oliver's hands shook just slightly as he placed them on the back of a chair. I won't do it. I won't let that man have him, not after everything we've learned about his methods. I promised Duke he'd be safe here, and I intend to keep that promise. For a heartbeat, silence. Even Julian was caught off guard by Oliver's conviction. But then, the businesslike mask slipped back into place. 7 days, Oliver. That's all the time you have. He turned and left, the echo of his footsteps a grim metronome down the hall. Lady Eleanor remained seated, the letter resting in her lap, her knuckles white. She glanced at a faded photograph of her ancestors hanging above the mantel, faces stern and proud. I failed them, she whispered, the words barely audible. Oliver walked to the window, watching as Julian's car disappeared down the drive. He tried to keep his own hands steady. They trembled, just a little, but he pressed them flat against the cool glass and breathed, in and out, forcing calm. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety. The staff felt the tension, even Alfie worked in near silence. The air was thick with unspoken fears. As the afternoon sun slanted across the yard, Oliver went back to his routine, 7 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, like clockwork, refusing to let the pressure change him or the schedule. Discipline, he told himself. Progress, inch by inch. But that evening, as Oliver passed the main office, a voice caught his attention. Lady Eleanor, speaking in hushed tones on the phone, her words tight with worry. Julian, is it done? Are you sure the contract is binding? She listened, nodded, then hung up, the lines on her face deeper than before. Oliver waited until she noticed him, her eyes wet. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what else to do. Oliver nodded, refusing to let his frustration show. I understand, ma'am. But I'm not giving up on Duke. Not now, not ever. Later, he sat with Duke in the quiet of the stall, the only sound the soft rhythm of the horse's breath. He watched Duke lower his head, nostrils brushing Oliver's shoulder, eyes soft and tired. They want to take you away, boy, he murmured. But I won't let them. Not if I can help it. He spent that night reviewing documents, combing through insurance policies, searching for any loophole, any hope. As the clock ticked past midnight, Oliver's eyes burned, but he kept going. By morning, he found it, a half-buried clause in the estate's loan agreement. If the stables suffered a major safety incident or public threat, Julian could force a sale of the property immediately. But unless such an incident was proven, the estate remained secure, and the creditors had no claim. Oliver realized then, Julian wasn't just trying to protect the family name or the estate's finances. He was looking for an excuse, a single mistake, a single outburst from Duke, to tip the scales and sell the land for profit. There was already a preliminary contract with a luxury resort developer, waiting in Julian's files. Duke was just a pawn. Rage flickered in Oliver's chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. It was more important than ever to keep the training safe, controlled, unassailable. He doubled down on every routine, every safety check. Not a single minute was wasted, not a single rule bent. On the 5th day, Lady Eleanor joined him at the stables, silent, watching. Oliver noticed her hands shake as she stroked Duke's mane, her eyes lingering on the scar across his neck. He never asked for any of this, she whispered, voice trembling. Nor did you. Oliver met her gaze, steady. We don't get to choose our battles, ma'am. We only choose how we fight them. Duke nickered softly, pressing against Oliver's arm, and for a moment, the old woman smiled. The countdown was on. 7 days to prove Duke's worth, 7 days to save the stables, and perhaps the soul of Ashbury Hall itself. The 6th day began with a sky the color of slate and a wind that whipped cold through the valleys of the Cotswolds. All morning, clouds gathered like an army on the horizon, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. Ashbury Hall felt tense, every window rattling, every staff member watching the sky. The countdown weighed on everyone. Even Duke seemed to sense it, shifting restlessly in his stall, flanks twitching at every distant thunderclap. Oliver stuck to his routine. At 7 o'clock, he checked the latches and hinges, ran his hands over Duke's coat, and whispered soft encouragement. At 1 o'clock, he led Duke around the ring, the big horse moving with a wary but growing confidence. At 5 o'clock, he gave extra hay, staying close, keeping his tone light for Alfie's sake, even as his own nerves strained under the pressure. But by dusk, the wind was howling and rain was coming in sideways, lashing at the windows. Tom Redfern, finished for the day, warned Oliver as he left. "You be careful tonight. Old Barn's seen its share of trouble in weather like this." Oliver nodded, securing the stalls as best he could, making sure Duke's bedding was dry, hay racks full, and every gate chained. Lady Eleanor and Alfie double-checked the tack room, the old woman moving slowly but with determination. Then, as night dropped like a curtain, the storm struck in full. Rain hammered the slate roof, wind shrieked around the corners of the ancient stone hall, and lightning flashed over the fields, turning the paddocks ghostly white for a heartbeat at a time. Oliver paced the stables, flashlight in hand, checking doors and windows. Duke was wide-eyed but quiet, ears flicking at every boom. Suddenly, a sound split the chaos, a splintering crack, sharp and brutal. The wind had torn a great wooden beam from the old barn roof, sending it crashing through the rafters. Oliver heard the screech of nails, the shout of Alfie from across the yard. He sprinted toward the noise, boots slipping in the mud, heart pounding as the stable roof groaned. He burst into the main barn. Lightning illuminated the disaster, part of the roof had caved, shattered beams and wet plaster blocking the aisle. Alfie, pale and frantic, was already at the door. "Oliver!" "The beam, it's trapped your leg." Oliver looked down, realized his right leg was pinned beneath the heavy timber, pain flaring sharp and cold up his side. Rain poured in through the broken roof, soaking the straw, making everything slippery and dangerous. In the chaos, Duke's stall door had sprung open, the horse rearing in panic, nostrils wide, eyes rolling white in terror. "Alfie, get back!" Oliver shouted, bracing himself against the pain. But Duke, wild and massive, wasn't fleeing. Lightning crashed, thunder shook the walls, and yet, through the roar, Oliver whistled, long and low, the same note he'd used every day. For a moment, nothing. Then, unbelievably, Duke stopped. His huge body shook, muscles tensed, but he turned, inch by inch, toward Oliver. Alfie's face was a mask of fear and hope. "He's coming back," he whispered. Duke stepped forward, not bolting for the open door, but approaching Oliver, even as the barn shook. Oliver reached out, voice ragged. "Easy, boy. I'm here. I'm right here." Another blast of thunder. Duke flinched but pressed closer, snorting, his chest brushing the fallen beam. Oliver, struggling against the weight on his leg, managed to grab the horse's mane. "Good lad. Good lad." Alfie crawled in, ducking under a splintered rafter, mud streaked across his cheeks. I'll help. Together, boy and horse, they managed to shift the beam just enough for Oliver to drag his leg free. The pain was blinding, but adrenaline drove him on. The three of them, man, horse, boy, staggered back as the barn groaned again, the wind howling louder. Then a sheet of corrugated iron tore loose from the roof, flying across the barn with a metallic shriek. Duke startled, but didn't flee. Instead, he pressed his head against Oliver's chest, breathing fast but steady. Oliver, gasping, pressed his forehead to Duke's, closing his eyes. Thank you. For a long moment, nothing else mattered. The rain, the thunder, the looming threat of loss, all faded. There was only the quiet heartbeat of trust, the bond that had taken days and nights to build, now forged in crisis. Alfie, shivering and soaked, wrapped his arms around Duke's neck. "He saved us. He really did." Oliver nodded, swallowing back emotion. "He did more than that, Alfie. He proved them all wrong." They huddled together until the worst of the storm passed, lightning receding into the hills. When finally it was safe, they limped and led Duke back to his stall, gently closing the door. The big horse stood calm, head lowered, eyes soft with exhaustion. Outside, Kira Doyle had arrived, her phone ready, drawn by the flashing blue lights of an emergency crew called by a neighbor. But something stopped her from filming. She saw Oliver, blood on his pant leg, mud on his hands, hugging Duke Alfie at his side. She lowered her phone. For once, the truth wasn't a headline. It was a miracle. Later, when the barn was patched and quiet, Lady Eleanor found Oliver sitting in the straw beside Duke, hand resting on the horse's shoulder. She placed a blanket around his shoulders and squeezed his hand. "You did it," she whispered. Oliver shook his head. "We did it. All of us." But inside, he knew the final battle still waited. As the first weak light of dawn crept through the battered rafters, Oliver watched Duke breathe in the morning air, unbroken, unbeaten, and, for the first time, truly home. Morning found Ashbury Hall battered but still standing. The storm had ripped slates from the roof and scattered branches across the yard, but the heart of the old estate, its people, its animals, remained intact. The barn still smelled of rain and adrenaline. Sunlight slipped through the holes in the roof, gilding the dust in the air, and for the first time in a week, Oliver felt the tremors of real hope. He woke on a makeshift cot in the tack room, his right leg throbbing but blessedly unbroken. Alfie had fallen asleep in the straw beside Duke's stall, one hand resting on the horse's withers. When Oliver limped out to check the stalls, he found Duke standing watch over the boy, head lowered, the great animal's breath ruffling Alfie's hair with every exhale. Lady Eleanor arrived soon after, relief painting her features as she saw both of them safe. "You boys are either brave or foolish," she said, her voice catching somewhere between a scold and a laugh. "I'm grateful all the same." Oliver managed a tired grin. It was Duke. He kept us together. By mid-morning, Dr. Priya Nyard arrived, her car bumping through the puddles, a medical kit slung over her shoulder. She wasted no time, examining Oliver's leg, tut-tutting over the swelling but declaring it only badly bruised. Then she turned her full attention to Duke. "Let's see about our hero." Duke stood calmly as she checked his legs, pressed gently along his barrel, and peered into his eyes. Priya's brow furrowed at the old scars, but there was satisfaction in her voice as she finished her examination. "No fresh injuries, no signs of aggression. He's nervous, yes, traumatized, absolutely, but what you've seen here isn't a dangerous animal. It's one that's learned to protect himself, to survive. If he was truly violent, none of you would be here this morning." Lady Eleanor nodded, her relief clear. "Will you put that in writing? The insurance adjuster is due any day now." Priya smiled and scribbled on her pad. "I'll make it official. Duke is not a public danger, merely a horse in recovery from severe mishandling." Outside, Harriet Bloom arrived with her RSPCA badge flashing in the sunlight. She surveyed the wreckage, nodding grimly as she took notes. "Rupert Vale's name keeps coming up," she said, flipping through her file. "Multiple complaints about the use of prohibited training aids, intimidation, and quick fixes. Last night's events only reinforce what I've seen in other cases. I'll be recommending that he be barred from operating on this property while the investigation continues." Oliver's relief was palpable. For the first time since arriving, he felt the tide turning. Harriet approached Alfie, who was leading Duke in gentle circles just outside the barn. The boy's posture was tentative, but his grip sure. Duke followed, his steps careful, his head bobbing at Alfie's quiet commands. "You've done well," Harriet said, her voice gentle. "I've seen grown men mishandle horses more than you." Alfie's cheeks flushed, pride and disbelief warring in his expression. "He trusts me," he said softly. "He really does." Oliver caught Lady Eleanor wiping a tear from her cheek as she watched Alfie and Duke together. By midday, the insurance agent arrived, briefcase in hand, frown deepening as he surveyed the barn's damage. Lady Eleanor and Oliver met him at the door, Priya's written report ready. They walked him through every step, the night's events, the training log, the testimonies from Alfie and Tom. Priya explained her findings with calm authority, emphasizing Duke's progress and his lack of aggression. The agent nodded, impressed but cautious. "If all this holds, your coverage will continue. But I'll need to file a report on the incident. Any further trouble, and we'll have to reevaluate." Lady Eleanor thanked him, relief visible in the sag of her shoulders as he left. As the day wore on, Kira Doyle returned, her phone held low, her expression thoughtful. She asked for a private word with Oliver outside the barn. Her usual bravado was gone, replaced by something softer. "I didn't film last night. I started to, but I couldn't. You all deserve better than a tabloid headline." She hesitated, then slipped a tiny SD card from her pocket. "I filmed Vale at another barn, months ago. using chains, ropes, shouting. I know I should have sent it in sooner, but, well, I wanted a story. Now I want the truth. She pressed the card into Oliver's hand. Maybe this helps. Oliver stared at the card, the weight of it sudden and immense. He nodded. Thank you, Kira. You did the right thing. She gave a quick, shy smile, then turned away, disappearing into the sunlight. Oliver brought the card to Harriet, who slid it into her laptop and played the footage. The images were damning. Vale wielding a whip, horses flinching, handlers looking away. Harriet's jaw set. This is exactly what we needed. They filed the evidence, and by afternoon, word arrived that Vale was officially barred from all Ashbury properties pending further investigation. As evening fell, the staff gathered in the main yard. Tom hammered new boards over the damaged barn wall. Alfie swept up the last of the debris, and Lady Eleanor brought out a pot of tea and sandwiches. Duke grazed quietly nearby, the center of a small crowd, no longer a threat but a survivor. Oliver leaned against the paddock fence, exhaustion giving way to satisfaction. We're almost there, he said, voice barely more than a whisper. Lady Eleanor joined him, her eyes shining. You've done more than save a horse, Mr. Kenton. You've saved all of us. Oliver smiled, watching Duke wander in the golden light, Alfie at his side. The battle wasn't quite over, but for the first time, hope felt stronger than fear. The day of reckoning dawned bright and cold, the first true autumn chill crisping the air over Ashbury Hall. Oliver woke early, nerves prickling his skin. This was the day everything would be decided, the day the public, the law, and Lady Eleanor's future would all gather in the old training yard to judge the Duke of Ashbury and, perhaps, the people who had tried to save him. By noon, a small crowd had assembled around the round pen. Neighbors, staff, and more than a few strangers leaned against the rails, curiosity and rumor drawing them in. Lady Eleanor wore her best jacket, face set with quiet dignity, standing beside Tom and Alfie, who fidgeted nervously. Harriet Bloom, RSPCA badge pinned to her coat, stood with Dr. Priya Nyard, holding files and a sense of silent authority. Even Kira Doyle was there, notepad in hand but her camera lowered, her expression serious. Julian, arms folded and jaw clenched, kept to the back, watching every move with sharp eyes. Oliver led Duke into the pen, every muscle in the big horse's body rippling with nervous energy but not fear. The crowd fell quiet, the usual hum of gossip and cell phone chatter replaced by an electric hush. Duke looked every inch the legend, black coat glossy in the sunlight, scar glinting like a medal. But there was no red danger tag, only a plain leather halter. Harriet addressed the crowd, voice ringing out clear. We're here to observe the handling of the horse known as the Duke of Ashbury, after a series of allegations regarding his behavior and welfare. This demonstration will be conducted by Mr. Oliver Kenton, with oversight from myself and Dr. Nyard. She nodded at Oliver, who took a steadying breath. He started simple. A long line attached to Duke's halter, Oliver stood in the center of the pen, letting the horse move in wide, slow circles. He gave calm commands, walk, halt, back, each word accompanied by a gentle gesture. The crowd watched, breath held. Duke's steps were careful, his head lowered, ears flicking to Oliver's voice. Not once did he bolt, rear, or bite. Instead, with each lap, he grew steadier, the ring of strangers slowly fading into the background. Oliver switched to groundwork, pressure and release, rewarding Duke's small efforts, never pushing too hard. He even handed the line to Alfie, who, trembling, led Duke around the pen, the massive horse matching the boy's hesitant steps with patience and trust. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Tom Redfern called out from the rails. Never thought I'd see that beast so calm. Lady Eleanor dabbed her eyes, hiding tears behind a white lace handkerchief. Priya Nair addressed the onlookers, her voice authoritative. This animal has not shown a single sign of aggression today, or in any of my examinations. His past reactions were all defensive, responses to fear, pain, or mishandling. This is a horse in recovery, not a danger. Harriet nodded, adding, as a representative of the RSPCA, I find no cause to recommend further action against the animal or his handlers. In fact, I commend the team for their dedication. The crowd broke into applause, slow at first, then swelling until it echoed against the old stone walls of Ashbury Hall. Lady Eleanor smiled, the lines of worry on her face finally easing. But Julian wasn't done. He stepped forward, voice sharp. None of this changes the fact that the stables are a financial liability. I have the right to protect this estate from ruin. If Duke so much as twitches wrong, the contract allows me to sell." The room quieted, tension returning like a cold breeze. Harriet turned to Julian, a steely edge to her tone. "Not so fast, Mr. Ashbury. The latest RSPCA and veterinary reports clear Duke of all charges. Further, we have video evidence, thank you, Kira, of Rupert Vale's unlawful training methods. That, combined with Priya's findings, voids any claim that the stables pose an immediate danger." Kira stepped forward, nervous but determined. "I filmed Vale using banned tools and aggressive techniques. The authorities have everything now. The story is out, he won't be working in the Cotswolds again." A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd. Tom grinned at Oliver, pride clear on his face. Then, Lady Eleanor's attorney stepped into the ring, documents in hand. "With this evidence, the clause in the loan contract regarding public safety incidents cannot be triggered. There is no cause for forced sale. The estate remains Lady Eleanor's, and the creditors have no grounds to proceed." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, suddenly, the staff and neighbors erupted into cheers, clapping and hugging each other. Alfie hugged Duke's massive neck, and the horse leaned into the touch, calm and at peace. Oliver felt the relief like a wave, sagging against the rail as Lady Eleanor embraced him. "Thank you," she whispered, tears spilling over. "You've saved my family's home, and you've saved him." Julian, his plans dashed, stormed away, phone already at his ear, voice bitter as he vanished toward the house. Harriet shook Oliver's hand. "You did right by him. By all of them." Even Kira, tears in her eyes, smiled. "I never thought I'd see the day a story ended this well." As the afternoon sun warmed the ring, Duke lifted his head, looking out over the crowd, no longer a threat, but a hero. The reckoning was over. The future, at last, was theirs to build. 4 weeks had passed since the showdown in the training yard, but Ashbury Hall still hummed with the aftershocks of victory. Where once uncertainty had haunted every step, now hope thrived. The estate had survived the storm, of nature, of greed, of memory. In the heart of the property, the barns gleamed with new boards, sunlight catching on fresh paint and the laughter of children running between stalls. The change was quiet, but it was everywhere. On a bright Saturday morning, banners fluttered at the gates, Ashbury Open Yard, all welcome. Lady Eleanor stood at the entry in her best coat, greeting visitors, neighbors, local families, even a busload of school children from the village. The place had not felt so alive in decades. A gentle breeze stirred the scents of grass, hay, and autumn earth. Inside the main paddock, Duke was the star. Children lined up to brush his enormous black flanks, giggling at his soft nose and the way his ears flicked whenever Alfie led him past. The boy's face glowed with pride, his once nervous hands now steady, guiding even the smallest hands with the confidence of someone who knew what it meant to be trusted. Tom Redfern was there, telling stories to a circle of wide-eyed kids, about farriers, about shires, about horses he'd known who'd come back from the edge. Dr. Priya Nair demonstrated simple vet checks for the crowd, showing them Duke's old scars, explaining how patience and gentle care could heal even the deepest wounds. Rupert Vale was nowhere to be seen. His name had faded from local gossip, and his face from the trending lists online. In his place was something better, a quiet, honest respect for the work that could not be rushed or faked. Kira Doyle walked the grounds with a notebook, stopping to interview Lady Eleanor and Oliver, her questions different now, less hungry for scandal, more searching for understanding. That afternoon, she posted an essay online, not a splashy exposé, but a reflective piece titled, "How One Horse Changed an English Estate, and Me." In it, she owned her mistakes and told the truth, that sometimes, the real story was not in the chaos, but in the small acts of kindness and courage that saved both people and animals from becoming their worst memories. As the sun climbed higher, Oliver worked the ring with Duke, demonstrating pressure and release for a growing audience. He spoke quietly, never performing, never showy, explaining that you never corner a horse, you always leave a way out. The crowd watched as Duke followed Oliver's signals, calm and dignified, no hint of the wildness that had once defined his reputation. The trust between them was a living thing, visible in every movement. Lady Eleanor watched from the sidelines, pride and gratitude etched deep in her eyes. When the ring was empty, she approached Oliver, a blue ribbon in her hands. "We'd like you to have this," she said, voice trembling just a little. "It's the Ashbury sash. My father wore it when he showed our horses. Today, it belongs to you, and to Duke." She clipped the ribbon to Duke's bridle, blue against black, and for a moment, the horse stood like a knight in old legend, gentle and noble. Applause rippled through the yard, staff and visitors cheering, cameras flashing. Alfie beamed as Oliver climbed, slow and steady, onto Duke's back, no fancy tricks, just a quiet circuit around the ring, their breathing matched. For Oliver, it was not about spectacle, but about presence. Every child pressed to the fence, watching in awe as the giant horse walked, steady and soft, under his rider's calm hand. Later, as the festivities quieted and the guests began to drift home, Lady Eleanor called the staff and volunteers together under the old oak by the main barn. Her speech was short, her words warm. "Ashbury Hall stands because we stood together," she said. "We faced the storm, the darkness, and the doubt, and we chose to fight for the right thing, not the easy thing. I am proud to call you my family, by blood and by choice." She turned to Oliver, a twinkle in her tired eyes. "And because every legacy needs a future, I am announcing the Ashbury Trust for Horses in Need. Oliver Kenton will serve as our program's first director. Alfie, you'll be his right hand. And Duke, well, he'll be our ambassador." The crowd erupted in applause. Alfie's eyes shone as Oliver clapped him on the shoulder. Even Tom's gruff voice caught as he cheered. Oliver took a quiet moment at Duke's stall that evening, stroking the big horse's mane as the sunset painted the world in gold and pink. He whispered, not just for Duke but for every soul who'd carried scars from battles no one else could see. "We did it, partner. Slow and steady. We kept our promise." Duke nickered softly, pressing his head into Oliver's chest. In that gesture, all the days of pain and fear were forgiven. What was left was something new, belonging. The estate's future was not certain, life never is, but Ashbury Hall had found its footing. Children's laughter echoed off old stones. Neighbors lingered, drawn by the promise of community and care. Horses with troubled pasts arrived, not to be fixed or rushed, but to heal at their own pace, guided by people who now understood that real trust was the work of a lifetime. In the heart of England, under skies that could turn from storm to sun in an instant, a battered Shire horse stood tall, carrying not just one man's hope, but the hopes of everyone who dared to believe that second chances were worth the fight. And so, Ashbury Hall began a new story, one of patience, redemption, and the quiet heroism that comes from never, ever giving up.